Thanks for joining us. As many of you probably know, 16 days ago, Congressman Mfume, Congresswoman Elfreth, Senator Alsobrooks, Congressman Olszewski, and Congressman Ivey and I came to this building to inspect the ICE facility. We were refused entry at that time. ICE clearly realized that they don't have the authority to do that. Members of Congress have a legal right to visit these facilities as part of their oversight duties. What we saw here was clearly a detention center. They want to claim that it's not a detention center. They want to just call it a holding facility. As you probably know, holding facilities were designed to keep people for 12 hours. 12 hours. Here, the average is now 72 hours. And we've had reports of people being held here for at least 8 days. If you look at the people in these rooms, they're clearly being detained. And they're being detained for more than 12 hours. And people get disappeared from here to other facilities without notice as to where they're going or giving their family members adequate notice. So what we are witnessing is a gross abuse of power by a lawless president and his cronies. They said they were focused on going after the worst of the worst. I want you to remember that. They said they were going after the worst of the worst. That would be warranted, and that would be totally appropriate if it were true. But it's not true, and all you have to do, and I encourage you to do this, is look at ICE's own most recent data. Because their most recent data shows that 84% of its detainees are in a category that's called no threat level. In other words, 84% of the people being detained across the country pose zero public threat. So they're not focused on the worst of the worst. The people they're focused on are people like Pastor Daniel Fuentes Espinal, the faith leader from Maryland's Eastern Shore, or others that we've seen from our communities that have been snatched up, like Melissa Tran, who is a small business owner. ICE arrested her because of a theft committed decades ago as a teenager. She served 9 months, 4 months, paid restitution. Then she became an upstanding member of her community with a small business. That's why you have the Hagerstown community in Maryland rallying to her support, as we see in so many other cases as well. We also know that this facility has been used to violate people's constitutional due process rights. As they did in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he was held here, and by 9-0, the Supreme Court determined that he had had his due process rights violated. Today, we were denied the opportunity to talk to any of the detainees. We have been told that Maryland law, a provision passed by the General Assembly, prohibits us from talking to any of the detainees to actually hear their stories. We have presented them with the Maryland law. Congressman Elfreth, previously State Senator Elfreth, was there at the time. I urge every one of you to look at it. There's nothing in Maryland law that prohibits a member of Congress from talking to a detainee. Clearly, they don't want us talking to the people who are detained here today and in the future. So we leave with more questions than we came from. We left them with a long list of questions to provide us answers for, because what we're asking for is transparency and accountability in our system. That's what we're looking for, transparency and accountability. Unfortunately, we're dealing with an administration that doesn't believe in transparency or accountability. You may remember just a few weeks ago, the Trump Justice Department Attorney General Pam Bondi sued the entire Maryland federal court bench. All the federal district court judges in Maryland were sued by Bondi because the Maryland judges wanted to protect people's constitutional due process rights. In fact, I understand that hearing is going to be today on that case, this very day. So we have a Justice Department that, instead of adhering to the law and adhering to their commitments regarding who they were going to focus on, has actually been in the process of undermining the law. And we know that because in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, one of the 15-year long attorneys, a longtime attorney at the Justice Department, who, by the way, was given an award by the former Trump administration, was fired because he refused to lie to the court. He refused to lie to the court, and so they fired him. That's what we're dealing with here with respect to this lawless administration. So we're going to keep at this. We're going to keep working to bring the public, all of the American public, the transparency and accountability that they deserve. And I want to thank Congressman Mfume, who's been working so diligently and so hard on so many things, but including ensuring due process of law, ensuring that we will push for transparency. And now let me turn it over to Congressman Mfume.
Thank you very much, Senator. There's an old term that says, the hurrieder I go, the behinder I get. And that's what it felt like today, 16 days after the time that we came here to carry out congressional oversight. As a senior member of the House Oversight Committee and as the ranking member of the Government Operations Committee, we have clear congressional jurisdiction over ICE. So for them to pretend and then to lie to all of you the last time by saying they did not get a request, it's shameful. It's inefficient, but it's mostly shameful. And so I presented their Director of Congressional Affairs with the letter that we sent to Secretary Noem, who sent it to him, and we have confirmation, and we did on July 22nd, the next day, that they had received it. So it's really disingenuous to say, well, you know, those guys never let us know they were coming. We did, and at some point, ICE needs to tell the truth. Now, the other thing is that the reason we're back here today is because they recognize that they were in violation of the law, of congressional law. And someone on high said, okay, we can't do this anymore, invite them in, which is what they did. So I hope that what happened here in Baltimore, by being able to gain access to a federal facility, starts now to happen all over the country. If indeed we are to be the example, so be it. We just have to have transparency. And one of the things that we underscored in our visit is that we're not here on behalf of any criminal, any lawbreaker, any gang member. We're here on behalf of information and transparency for the 80% of people who have been snatched off of our streets, who ICE says in their own statistics pose no threat to safety. Those people have no mouthpiece, they have no voice, and they have very, very few options. So let the word go out today that this is about the innocents, the ones who, as they said, stepped across the border and got here legally, those who may be in communities all over this country, 15, 20 years in, working, paying taxes, abiding by the law, raising their families. There's got to be a more decent and humane way to go about this. And that's the case that we are making today. There seems to be a great deal of inefficiency in the ICE operation, and shame on them. The people of this nation deserve better, no matter how you feel about immigration. We are a system and a society of basic laws and courtesies, and a belief that people are innocent until they're proven guilty, and that everybody deserves an opportunity to try to pursue in their own way what it means to be in this country, paying taxes, obeying the law, and looking at persons around them to try to find a way to emulate them. So we leave here with more questions than we came in with. And it was that way the last time we were here, and unfortunately it's still that way now. Now, they've promised to get back to us on at least 20, 25 issues that have come up, one after another after another. So we'll see how that goes. But I can tell you the Committee on Government Oversight, and particularly my Committee on Government Operations, we just want answers. We want the truth, the facts, and we want to find a way to make sure that that's public and transparent. I'll give you an example. They couldn't tell me how many Haitians or Africans have been in this facility, or how many people may have been from Mexico or Honduras, or how many have been from Europe, any European country. They said, well, we'll have to get back to you on that. Well, a simple spreadsheet, which I assume you update every time you take somebody in, would answer that question. So this is what I mean about inefficiencies. And the tragedy here, if I may say this, is that today it's people from various countries who came to this country seeking a better way of life. Some of them were even born in this country. All of them, for the most part, have tried to live out the creed of this nation. And as the statistics bear out, 80% of all those apprehended, 80%, pose no public threat. They're in our schools, they're in our churches, they're in our jobs. They're working odds and ends to make things meet. They're around us every day. Do they need to obey the law? Absolutely. Do they need to find a way to apply for citizenship? Absolutely. Do they need to be snatched off of the street outside of a Walmart with men with masks on and thrown in a van and disappeared? No way. So it's important to find a way to get ICE to live up to the congressional mandate they're under. They keep saying this is not a detention center. The language that goes with the bill refutes that. And anytime you're detaining somebody, it's detention. So let me yield to Congresswoman Elfreth, who has been with us on this journey every step of the way. We recognize that today it's somebody else, tomorrow it could in fact be one of us. And when I say one of us, I don't mean a member of Congress, but just anybody on the street who looks suspicious or who is of the wrong nationality. Please welcome Congresswoman Elfreth.
Thank you, Congressman. I'd like to be clear that when we first came here 16 days ago, we were not here to protest. We were not here to sit on the floor. We were here, frankly, to exercise our congressional legal right to conduct oversight. Now, that has been questioned by ICE, it's been questioned by the Secretary of Homeland Security, and it is absolutely false that we came here for any other reason than to simply exercise our oversight on behalf of our districts and on behalf of the United States Congress and United States Senate. So today, 16 days later, because of that legal guarantee that we could conduct that oversight and because of the public pressure on ICE to let us in the room, instead of being met with a locked door, as we did 16 days ago, we were met with an open door. We were able to ask questions. You all waited here longer than probably you thought because we were having a very robust discussion. Many questions were asked, as Congressman Mfume said, very few were answered. We are here because everybody who steps foot in this country deserves due process. And I'm shocked that that is even up for debate in 2025. But it's something we should all expect for ourselves, for our families, and for our neighbors. And we're talking about folks who are taxpayers, we're talking about folks who are churchgoers, we're talking about folks who are small business owners. And we should expect that very due process. And so some of the questions we asked today are about, do people who are detained here have access to an attorney? Do they have the ability to call and meet with their family members? Do they have access to their medication or hospital needs? All of those questions we received some answers to. I'm not sure they were all satisfactory for what we would expect, again, for ourselves, our families, or our neighbors. And so we are going to continue to run those questions down. We're going to continue this drumbeat to make sure that ICE is transparent and accountable. As it's been said, none of us are here to defend hardened criminals or gang members or anybody who's in violation of the laws. But we're talking about people who in many cases have been here for years or decades. They've raised families here, they've started businesses here, they pastored here, they have children, many of whom are United States citizens here, pay taxes here. And it is our job, because they are our neighbors and because they live in our districts, to conduct this oversight and ensure due process. And those are the questions I would hope that every American would want their members of Congress to ask of any president, of any administration. And so we're going to continue to do that and continue to speak up and speak out as people are being picked up off the streets. Not just on the streets, ICE has overturned a long-standing tradition where they normally would have otherwise given credence, given respect to houses of worship or schools or hospitals or even the courts. ICE is now going into all of those places, all of those spaces, and snatching people up. And so we have a right, as your members of Congress, to ask these questions, to keep up the pressure, but we cannot do it alone. And so I'm grateful for the folks who are here and watching today to have our back as we conduct this necessary oversight.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues. Any questions? If you can just say who you're with.
I'm Hannah Gaskell. I'm with the Baltimore ICE.
That's what I thought.
It seems like there's been some issue with the state getting data from ICE about how many people have been detained, sleeping on duration. Do you know how many people are being detained here today? Do you know how many people have been detained since January 20th?
So we asked them how many people have been detained. They did not have an exact answer to that question. We asked them what the maximum number of people who've been here at one time has been. They said over 100, which is a lot of people to cram into a relatively small space. Today there were fewer people. I think we saw about 7 or 8 people. That's partly, they explained, because ICE, Maryland, is involved in operations south of Maryland in DC and other states, and so their personnel are not working in Maryland for the next couple days, or we don't know how long, and that means there are fewer people here because this is where they bring people who've been detained from Maryland. Yeah.
So speaking, keep hearing the word holding room. How many holding rooms did you guys see? And how many people were approximately in those said holding rooms? 3 large. I work for WJD.
So they have about 3 larger holding rooms. The largest capacity around 35, 40. I don't hold me to that. They have 3 larger rooms, and then they have 2 much smaller rooms. That's.
You couldn't sit though.
What's that?
If there were 40 people in one of those rooms, you wouldn't be able to sit down all at the same time.
And just remember, they've chosen to make the nuance around the word detention center. Anytime you detain anybody overnight or for 1, 2, or 3 days, it's a detention center, and they can call it what they like. I mean, in many respects, the Justice Department has become the Just ICE Department. The Justice Department supports this foolishness, and ICE continues to go through it, and they play words, game words. It's like detention center. People are being held in there. And the ones that we saw as we looked through those glass windows are being detained. They're not overnighters.
I have one more question, Senators. Will this be your last visit? Do you guys plan to come back here again to hold them accountable and to see if they answered those 20 to 25 questions?
I think it's fair to say we will continue to insist on transparency. We will insist on accountability. We will demand answers to the questions that we presented because, as all of us have said, we need to be able to hold people accountable to the law and to due process. And I don't think any American should expect anything less.
I think, I'm Brenda Richter with Baltimore Banner. I think all of us would appreciate a description of what you saw and how the tour proceeded. What were the conditions that you saw? Did you see others?
Did not see anyone sleeping there. I saw, as we looked through those big glass windows into what they call a holding area, which clearly looked like a cell to me, that can accommodate 10, 20, 30 people. We saw people looking back at us. wondering who we were, why were we there, and what were we looking at. And then beside that, I mean, it has the kind of cold feeling that you would find in any police station. I don't know how to describe it any other way.
They're mats. The mats.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, they've got a lot of mats for people to sleep on, which I assume they roll in at some point in time. I looked in the area where the women are being held. There was a woman there sitting on I guess it was a bench in there, but at night I assume they bring the mats in. They showed us a group of 30, 40, 50 mats that are there. And some of our concerns was what happens with women who have sanitary needs, what happens to people who have daily medications that were not on them when they were apprehended, and what happens to those that come in not being classified by nationality. So there are a lot of things they're going to get back to us on, we believe.
I was particularly focused on the due process pieces we've been discussing. So if folks are here for an average of 72 hours, if you're picked up by ICE and brought here on a Monday morning, that is pretty good luck because you're able to call your family. Maybe they can get an attorney for you within 24 hours. That attorney from anywhere in the state could come to Baltimore and try to get access, signing privacy release forms, etc. But I would caution that's kind of a perfect world, a Monday morning, right? What happens when folks are brought here on a Friday evening and brought out on a Monday morning when the hours of operation for the public, including attorneys, is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And so that was a particular concern for us about access to attorneys, access to family members during that time.
You touched on this a little bit of the questions that you left with. Could you run through just a few more of the things that you're kind of still wondering about?
Well, I can't remember the entire list, but I can give you some examples. Yeah, we wanted to know definitively what's the longest amount of time one person has been held here, because I think it's really important to understand that this was designed for 12 hours, okay? 12 hours. That was the Department of Homeland Department's standard. So they've blown way through that when they have an average of 72 hours. This is why anybody can apply a little common sense and know this is a detention facility. That's why they had to go over the 12. The 12 hours was supposed to be a holding facility. You go over 12 hours, you got a detention facility for sure. So we asked them about that. We've asked them to show us where in Maryland law it actually says that members of Congress cannot ask questions or interview detainees. And we also asked them a lot of questions about this issue of people being able to deliver what are called privacy releases to detainees, because we've all experienced a lot of trouble when we talk to family members of detainees who want to make sure that their family member or loved one can sign a privacy waiver, because until they sign a privacy release, the ICE officials can't allow them to communicate any information to the outside world. But they've made it very difficult here at this place to get privacy releases in. So it's a way of preventing detainees from being able to communicate their situation to family members.
I'll start as I started. The hurrieder we go, the behinder we get. They could not give us specifics. The refrain was, we'll get back to you on that, we'll get back to you on that. Oh, yes, we'll get back to you on that also. In fact, before the meeting adjourned, we reminded them that they've got a lot of things to, quote, get back to us on, but they couldn't say why they couldn't provide the information on the spot. It's like the information I requested on nationalities. I said, how many are here from Africa or Haiti or Europe or some Central America? He said, well, you know, it's a good question. We'll get back to you on that. So if you're not doing that at intake, if you're not processing that information, it's because you are inefficient. And if you are processing it and not giving it, it's because you're lying. And I will say that there was an effort by one or two persons there to assist without getting out of line so that they didn't lose their jobs. But by and large, it was, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you. Now, we'll get back to all of you once we get what we need. Thank you.
Representative Mfume, Blair Stable with WMAR speaking, jumping off on that point, you're talking about the data that they didn't have about race and just numbers, and we haven't seen data on that portal we've been checking in since January as well. How confident are you that they are actually taking that information down and they have it somewhere?
Well, they do have it, and I think Senator Van Hollen may want to speak more specifically about it. It's out there. For the lay public, people had to see what was in the Baltimore Banner to get a sense of what was going on. The statistics are that hard to come by. And those statistics were good statistics, and they could not refute them. They just said, we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, they said they clearly take the data at intake as to, what country a person's originally from or what their nationality has been. As Congressman Mfume said, they just haven't compiled it, which would be a pretty straightforward thing to do. Another thing they don't have for this detention facility is what they have nationally. As I cited, nationally, as of the end of July, this is ICE data, right? 84% of the people in detention, 84% of the people in detention pose no public threat by their own admission. So one question I had is that the president says that he's going after the worst of the worst. So I asked them very directly, what kind of directive or communication have you gotten from the president or the head of the Department of Homeland Security as how to define the worst of the worst? Because your own data shows that you're not going primarily after the worst of the worst. As we've all said, when you're talking about somebody who's a criminal and a violent history, obviously it's warranted and appropriate to go after them. But their data shows that 84% of the people they're taking up nationally have no public safety threat. They did not have that information for this detention center. In other words, they could not tell us, of the people who have come through here, how many they judge don't have pose a public safety threat. They've got the national data. You would think they would have that data here. Clearly, they've not gotten anything from the president also that defines the worst of the worst, because by their own admission, they're not going after only the worst of the worst. We know that from the data, but they admitted it as well, very clearly.
Okay.
All right, take one more.
How long were you in there? And were there any ground rules on what you could and couldn't say at all?
Now, the tour was led by the director, Ms. Baker, the assistant director, the head of congressional affairs, and I don't know who the other persons were.
We couldn't bring our phones outside of the meeting room. I personally did not bring my personal phone on the off chance that it would be taken. So we couldn't take any pictures of inside the detention facility. As we said, we have a lot of follow-up to do, and I would just like people to think through, as the senator said, by their own admission, their own data, 84% of people, and you can extrapolate to this facility as well, who come through these doors have not posed no harm, have not committed violent offenses. We're talking again about pastors and small business owners and taxpayers. If they don't have access to due process, we cannot prove that they don't have temporary protective status or even that they're a U.S. citizen. They could be shipped off to anywhere in this country, Louisiana, Texas, Alligator, Alcatraz, God knows, without access to an attorney, their medication, contact with their family members. That is why we are here, to ensure that due process is honored.
Thank you all.
Senator.
We'll take one last one, if that's all right.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. President Trump, you mentioned him, has said that he's doing in the spring what he was elected to do. The Biden administration, there were certainly some question marks about the security of the border there. Would you place any blame on the prior administration just for potentially creating a situation where a lot of people in these countries had hoped they came here and now they're in kind of flux because there is a new administration?
So the first thing I would say is that the president made a lot of promises as to what he was going to be doing on day one. apart from this issue, and I'll get to that in a moment, he said he was going to bring down prices in the United States. Hasn't done it. He said he was going to end the war in Ukraine. He's been played by Vladimir Putin. He said he was going to end the war in Gaza. We know what's happening there. We have a lot of people starving from lack of food. So he made a lot of promises that he hasn't kept. With respect to this issue, we all support stronger border security. And I have long believed that we need tight border security. And we can make improvements there, and improvements were being made. But that's a very different thing, strengthening your border, than going after people who have no criminal records and pose no threat to public safety. And so to your question, when the president says they're focused just on the worst of the worst, that's just a lie. Their own statistics show that. And so that's why actually the American people, if you ask them today, even on this question of immigration, yes, they support border security, as do all of us. But actually they think that the way that President Trump is handling these issues, that he's gone way too far. That's what the majority of American people think. Thank you. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.